out here this morning. It's 5:47, sunrise is at 5:50, so I'm really tired, but it's looking pretty nice in the sky, so I'm glad I came out here, but I'm really tired. All right, I'm woken up a little bit now, and I'm not as tired, so I want to show you guys my sunrise setup. So this is what I got going on right here. Got this iPhone set up with some gaff tape, catching that sunrise, you know what I'm saying? This is the poor man setup when you don't actually have a little iPhone rig or whatever. But anyway, I'm gonna catch this here sunrise.
I try to see the sunrise.
There's a quick little way that you can make your telephoto or kind of normal range, mid-range lens into a wide angle lens. So what you do is you take a bunch of different shots, stitch them together. So what I like to do is I start right in the middle. So take a shot in the middle, point it lower and keep the horizon in the shot, point it up, keep the horizon right at the bottom of that frame there, so you can match that up. And in this case, I actually did some bracketing. And so I took one bright, one dark, so the sand could be brighter and the sky could be darker. And then boom, pan over, get one in the middle, one down, one up, boom, pan over this way, one in the middle, one down, one up, and then you stitch those all together in Photoshop, and now you have a much wider shot that you can't really capture. Sometimes even if you have a wide angle lens, you want to be able to capture a really big wide area. So here's the effect of this video that I just put together, stitched. So that looks awful. Anyway, shots that I took earlier, stitched them together. Now here's the final result on that one. Looked pretty awesome. I like how it turned out. So let's jump into Photoshop. Okay, so this is the image that we're starting with, and we are gonna turn it into this. So is all those shots that we just took a look at before. I showed you how to shoot those. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring all of those into Photoshop. And I'm not gonna do any adjustments to the actual raw file. You should be fine, just leave the raw settings as they are. You can hold Option and press on this little eyeball icon, and when you do that, it's gonna turn off every other layer except the one that you press. So now we've got all the layers above hidden, and we have just our bottom layer, which is gonna be our main layer, shown through right here. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and get every single shot that we have lined up pretty close to that very first shot. Okay, so I'm looking right here at these two kind of identical beach houses right in the center. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna line up every single shot to those two beach houses. And what you wanna do is you wanna make sure that you line up every shot to your original shot. If you start lining up shots in kind of a sequence, if you keep leaving the layers on as you line them up, you're gonna eventually get further and further away from that original shot. So go ahead and grab your crop tool by hitting the letter C. So what we're gonna do is open up the canvas to the area of where our pictures are. If you have some gaps on the outside, that's fine. We'll be able to take care of that later. So again, we're gonna hide all the other layers besides our main layer, our first layer, and we are gonna start building from here. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna paint back the sky that has the better exposure. So what we're gonna do here is process using the channels section. So if you look over where your layer box is, right next to that it says channels. And the basic idea of this method is you choose the channel, either red, green, or blue, that has the most contrast already built into the shot. For this scenario right here, what I'm looking for is I want those beach houses to be dark and I want the sky above them to be bright. So as I click through it, it looks like the red channel has the most naturally occurring contrast between the beach houses and the sky. So I'm gonna choose that one and I'm gonna duplicate that red channel. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull up a levels adjustment by hitting Command L. I'm gonna bring my blacks down, I'm gonna crush those blacks way down, and I'm gonna bring the highlights up. So once we've got that, we're really close to having everything perfectly contrasted out. We're gonna grab our brush, bring the hardness up to 100%, and we're gonna paint out the parts that we don't need, that are easily painted out, they're not part of the selection. Just grab a white brush, paint that out, and then do the same thing with a black brush. Just paint those parts in that aren't gonna be on that kind of border there. And once we've done that, now we've got a great area to be able to make a selection from. So to make a selection from this channel layer that we've created, just hold Command and click on that thumbnail that's there. So that's gonna give us our selection. So now that we have that selection, we're able to go back to our layers panel, and we're gonna find the layer that has the sky exposed correctly, and we're gonna create a layer mask. using that mask that we just created. So now, as you can see, the sky that's exposed darker is only showing through above that selection that we made. So the beach houses in the sand are not being affected at all. And so now we have these two different pieces that are stacked together. And now we're getting a really high dynamic range and a really high quality image here. So one thing we do want to do is just zoom in on the selection that we've made and just make sure that selection works. Make sure there's no weird dark edges or highlighted edges. And so I'll just manually go through and kind of touch that up. So we're gonna turn on this next layer, and what we're gonna do is, instead of lining it up, we're not gonna keep it lined up with the center like we had. This center picture that we started with originally, but it has a little bit of distortion around all those edges. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna paint in with all these other shots that we've gotten from the sharpest parts of the lens. So you're really gonna end up with a very high quality photo in terms of resolution, but also in terms of what part of the lens they're using. So these rocks right here are right in the center of the frame. So if we actually line up these rocks with the rocks at the bottom of that original picture, we're gonna essentially be using the sharpest parts and the highest quality parts of the lens for each shot. So right now I'm just looking for spots that are obvious that it's stitched, and I'm removing those out. As you can see, it was a little bit darker compared to the original shot, so I'm just gonna mess with the exposure a little bit, and that's about the brightness that we need there to be able to blend it. That looks pretty seamless to me. And I'll just make a few final touches there on this bottom part of the frame. So just make sure it looks good on the seams where it's gonna actually be transitioning from one photo to the next. Once those look good, you're good to go. So we'll move on to the next photo, which is the one on top. So if you wanted to, you could just do these three and have yourself a nice vertical shot. As a filmmaker, I really like doing the big wide shots, but you could just stop here if you wanted. All right, so now we're gonna take our first image from the left-hand side, and we're gonna line up. I'm just looking here for different parts of the image that I'm able to line it up. Now I can see that this seashell doesn't line up with that one, but the top of the frame is lined up. So what I'm gonna do is actually just stretch. So this is the kind of the distortion I was telling you about. The original image is distorted on this side. It's a very noticeable seam here. It's a noticeable edge with these homes. So I need these homes to look very realistic and a very smooth transition here on the side. So now that I've lined up that distortion on the side with this image, I'm gonna duplicate the layer and start a new blend here for these houses. So I'm gonna go ahead and transform this image to match up with the houses that we've already established in this shot. So I'm gonna put it right there on the edge, and then I'm gonna move my anchor point right to the edge of that house. And then I'm just gonna scale it a little bit, make sure it's lining up. Yep, so that lined up pretty well. So I'll just paint in a little bit of that darkness and just make sure that matches up. And we're not worried about the sky right now because we'll bring in the sky later. The sky is gonna be darker anyway, so it'll match up with that first picture's darkness. We're just worried about these houses now. So now I'm painting in the houses, painting a little bit of the sand on the outside there from the stretch that we just made. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna do the same technique that we did earlier. We're gonna choose let's go with the red channel, and we're gonna add a levels adjustment to that, and let's get our houses down to those blacks and the sky up to those whites, and then again you can paint this in. So now that we've got this selection, we're gonna paint back in the sky. So now look at that, we're painting in the sky, but we're not messing with the houses at all. So we do have a little bit of weird edges here, so again I'm just gonna go back in and touch those up. These houses are pretty dark, especially on the edge over here, so it won't be too bad of a transition here, and so I'm just gonna touch up a little bit of this. So we're now moving on to our top left image here, and this is awesome. So when I was shooting this, I noticed this bird flying through the shot, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to shoot this, I need to shoot this. So I caught him right here coming in the frame, but his wing got cut off a little bit, so I'm just gonna rebuild that wing so it looks like he is there, and then I'm gonna have to kind of paint some of this seam in right here that came with the bird, just to make it look like he really was fully there in the shot. And some of these lighter areas are not really selling it, so I'm just gonna paint in a little bit of that dark. There we go, that looks good. I love the sunlight that came under his wing, it looks so cool. That same bird flew through the shot, and I got him in two different places, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put him back into the shot in both of those places. So now it looks like there's two birds there, even though that's technically the same bird. Don't tell anybody, don't tell your friends. Anyway, so now I'm finishing off the top left layer, and I'm just adding in, just making sure some of these clouds line up somewhat, just line up believably. Clouds move so fast, like I'm telling you, I shot all of these pictures, all 9 of these pictures, or 18, or whatever, how many I shot. Honestly, I'd say less than a minute or 2, and the clouds moved pretty far in that time. So the trick with clouds is just make it look as believable as you can. Go with what was there, but again, if you have to touch it up a little bit just to make it look realistic, it's fine. You may have to do that. Now we're on the shoreline. On this side, we don't have any beach houses, but we have this, not shoreline, we have this horizon line with the ocean, which is another important selection that we're gonna be making. So, and once again, we're doing our black and white, we're doing our channel selection technique to be able to use that. And again, the selection doesn't always work perfectly when you do the channels and the levels and stuff. So I go back in and clean that up. Sometimes you have to do many different channel layers to get good selections on different parts. So if your shot has different contrast levels in between, you're gonna have to do a couple different channel layers. But what I'll do is I'll duplicate the first one, keep that one as my main channel selection, do as much as I can there, duplicate and make a whole nother one, just focus on one select area, and then make a selection of that one, go back to our main selection, which has the majority of the selection looking really good. You can go back and paint in on that main one, but that way you have that one main selection that continues to be refined, and then you have a really nice selection from that. Okay, that selection looks good. Let's go ahead and select it, give it a small bit of a feather here, and we're gonna go ahead and erase that, and we're gonna add in the nice looking sky behind that. A little bit different than the way we did it before, but it still works just fine. And this way may even work a little bit better, because then we can move the sky down a little bit so you don't see the shoreline, so it makes it a little bit more believable as far as the blending goes. So we've got this kind of white highlight because the selection isn't always perfect when you do the channels. So I'm gonna touch up some of the people that are walking here, and okay, and it looks like the ocean is a little bit too bright here. It just looks to stand out from that dark background, and even from the dark sand. So what we're gonna do is paint in the darker exposure for the sky, and then just nice and softly paint in this ocean. So I'm just using a brush at around 30% on the opacity, so we're just painting that back in just to make it look a little bit more natural. All right, so we've lined up our bottom right layer. We can go ahead and just brush that one in. And then now we're gonna move up to our top right layer. And yeah, so this one gave me a little bit of trouble. So I tried painting it in and it just didn't fit. But yeah, it took me a little while. I had to really scale this one up and do some trial and error. But once I got it, I think it blended in really nicely and added some good touch to the top right of our screen, and even got a little bit higher up and filled in some of that gap, which is nice. So what I'm gonna hit now is Command Option Shift N. So that's gonna give us a brand new layer, and then I'm gonna hit Command Option Shift E, and that will give us a merged layer. So it's gonna take everything we did and merge it down into one layer. So now we have a brand new merged layer on top of everything that we've done. And now what we're gonna do is take our selection tool and select these areas on the outside that aren't filled in. And we're gonna fill those in with Content Aware. Now, if you saw my last tutorial, you know that we did Content Aware Fill in After Effects, which is a brand new tool, but it's actually been around a long time in Photoshop. And so basically what you need to do is just make a selection outside this area that's not filled in, right click, hit Fill, and make sure Content Aware Fill is selected, 100% opacity, and it sees everything in the image, and it makes a very educated guess as to what is supposed to be there, and boom, fills it in. It's crazy. You look at it and you would never know that it was filled in with a computer. All right, so now we've got our image. It's looking pretty good. Now I'm finished with all the touch-ups, and I'm gonna actually just go ahead and grade this image. So I'm gonna take this merge layer into Camera Raw filter, because I like being able to edit, even though it's not actually a raw photo, I like being able to edit and grading from this raw dialogue. So we're added that Camera Raw filter, and look at that. That's looking pretty sweet now. We've got a lot more color going on, a little more contrast. Still caught those highlights and kept all this in. I'm gonna add a little bit of texture to this bird here, just so he stands out a little bit more. Since he was flying, my shutter speed wasn't very high on this shot. His wings kind of got a little bit blurry here. So what I'm gonna do is just paint a little bit of clouds back in and kind of fakely sharpen up his wings. So now I'm gonna add that hue saturation layer and just mess around with the colors a little bit. Just moving it, I kind of like this teal and orange look. I don't always go for that. I know that's heavily overused in the movies and everything, but just moving it towards teal and orange, just a little bit, just slightly. I actually really like that, so I'm gonna stick with that. And what we're gonna do is go ahead and crop. These are just suggestions, so it's really subjective at this point. You can grade it how you like it, you can crop it how you like it. I cropped it here and I like it, but I just feel like that bird at the top is a little too pushed to the top of the frame, and I just feel like it's a little bit off balance. So I'm actually gonna go ahead and recrop and put the horizon line at the bottom third. So we'll have like beach at the bottom third, and the sky will be like the top 2/3 of the frame. Okay, I really like how this is cropped now. But since we don't have any pictures that are going up that high, what I did was just did another content aware fill, and then also did some cloning to touch up some of those areas that didn't look natural, because the content aware fill kind of repeated a lot of things. So you have to watch out for any repeating sections, because sometimes Photoshop will just blatantly like boop, 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 repeat something. So I just touched up those a little bit, and I also cleaned up this lens flare because it's always bothered me. So here is our final image. Thanks for checking out this tutorial, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. I hope you're encouraged and inspired to go out and take a bunch of photos and stitch them all together and see what you guys can come up with. I'd love to see them. I'd love to hear what you guys thought in the comments. Let me know. But until next time, peace out.